And I would like to know from the government, given that the department you refer to is having trouble maintaining its staff, as do most government departments that I have experience of, none of us believe that smashing the gangs has any hope of getting any traction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
People, if they wish to speak, please to bob or stand. Okay, I call Nigel Farage.
Thank you very much indeed, and I thank the honourable member for Harborough for calling this debate. He must find it excruciatingly embarrassing how badly the previous government dealt with this issue. With my strong connection in Kent and Sussex with the commercial fishing industry, the angling trade and indeed the lifeboats, I started to feel in early 2020 that the odd boat that had crossed, as the honourable member from Dover mentioned, in 2018 and 19, that something big was about to happen, that the gangs had realised that your chances of deportation from this country were very low. And so I went out repeatedly from Dover into the English Channel, filming boats, meeting face-to-face boatfuls of the young men that have been described, in many cases very aggressive young males. But I also got to the bottom of the use of the word escorts. I kept being told that escorts were crossing the channel. I wasn't quite sure what they meant to begin with, but then I understood it was the French Navy, that the French Navy literally escorted boats across the English Channel and handed them over to Border Force or RNLI. So I made a bit of a fuss about the whole thing. I said unless something was done, huge numbers would come. I said there might even be an invasion, a word that got me in very big trouble. But given that we're pushing up towards 140,000 that have come, I don't think I misused the word. The efforts of the last government to deal with this were frankly pretty pitiful, and Rwanda might have worked in theory, but of course in practice it was not going to work. All the while we are subject to that court in Strasbourg, as we saw that evening. And more interestingly, the incorporation of the convention into British law means that actually British judges will always rule in favour of ECHR. So we have to face up to that reality. I also believe what we're facing is a national security emergency. When ISIS boasted in 2015 that they would use the Mediterranean to get their operatives into Europe, perhaps the European Union should have taken them more at their word. And it was interesting to note that Sir Keir Starmer himself used the phrase national security emergency during the general election. So he's going to have to act accordingly. Appointing a new border chief commander, yeah, we may get some better intelligence, fine. But you know, the French already, and we have given them hundreds of millions of pounds, the French do stop a lot of dinghies from crossing. They put knives in the dinghies, but the problem is that the prospective illegal immigrants just hide in the dunes and come back the next day. So that isn't going to work. And smashing the gangs, well, I don't know. And I've been hearing for the last 30 years, we're going to smash the drugs gangs in this country. And yet there's more Class A drugs being taken today than there ever were before. You know, a good operative gang working out of those sand dunes in northern France in a reasonable week of weather can expect to make at least €2 million. The financial rewards are very, very high. So really what this comes down to are two things. Number one is political will. Successive Australian prime ministers attempted to deal with the problem. They all failed. They tried offshore processing, etc., until in the end, Tony Abbott just towed the boats back to Indonesia. There was international outrage from the UN, the EU, and indeed from the Foreign Office, of course.
Are you aware of the fact that they were still hulled vessels?
Can I just say, if somebody intervenes, you sit down. Thanks.
And if we attempt to do the same, we're likely to kill people in our waters. Is that what you want to see?
Just a few weeks ago, for the first time, Border Force did an emergency pickup on the other side of the line, and rather than bringing the people back to this country, as previously, you know, Dover Lifeboat had done, Dungeon Lifeboat had done, they actually took them into Calais, all right? So that is the way that we do it. Yes, you're right, these are far flimsier vessels, but the principle that you take people back to from whence they came is the point that I'm trying to make. And we can do this. We can do this under the international law of the sea. We can do this. I would ask, Minister, that given the money we've given to the French, we no longer accept escorts from the French Navy. The day after 12 people died in the Channel, the day after, there was a French naval vessel escorted a dinghy from a couple of hundred yards off Wissant all the way to our 12-mile line. No more French naval escorts, I think, is vital. So we need political will, and the Germans, of course, are now showing it. The Germans will ignore the ECHR. The Germans, by the way, sent a plane back full of young men to Afghanistan the other week. So with political will, with leaving the ECHR, we can solve this. And I would just promise the Labour government one thing. This issue caused great pain to the Conservative Party, and it impacted in the general election. This issue of illegal migration and the crime that it leads to, which is a conversation that's barely started in this country, but a conversation that in France and Germany is now very big, will do massive damage to Labour's electoral chances. You're going to have to get tough, and I'm afraid your leader is going to have to rethink his position on the ECHR. Thank you.
Just before I move on to the front bench contributions, can I just say to some of the newer members, I've heard people say you or name people by name. It's convention that you name either the office that they hold, such as Prime Minister, or the seat which they represent. Okay, just to remind people. I call front bench for the Conservative Party, Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Sir Mark. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I also give my thanks to the Honourable Member for Harborough, Oadby and Wigston for securing this very important debate today. As he says, people are arriving here confident in the belief that they'll get to stay, and that must change. The cost to the taxpayer is increasingly beyond security, and we're yet to see the targets set by Labour. I want to start my contribution today by echoing the comments made by colleagues about concerns associated with illegal immigration, which are undoubtedly incredibly serious and shared by many of those we represent. The Honourable Member for Rother Valley talked about the real and horrendous human cost of this issue, as we saw in recent weeks, and probably one of the many reasons that we need to work urgently to get a grip on it. The Honourable Member for West Suffolk talked about the bizarre creative accounting put forward by the government in efforts to defend the scrapping of the deportation deterrent, and the fact that moving the costs from one department to another will not solve the problem. The Honourable Member for Great Yarmouth made valid observations about the nature of the many people arriving and their motivations. The Member for Ashfield talked about, well, asked the question of what it is that people are fleeing from France and the important need to stop that pull factor that draws people to get into those small boats. The Member for Clacton told us of his learnings about escorts, issues that are created by the ECHR, which have been debated many times and will be debated many times in this place in the coming weeks, months, years, and talked about the concerns, rightly, that these pose to national security. With other business going on in the House today, it seems apt to start by looking at the cost of illegal immigration. Asylum accommodation is costing the taxpayer over £8 million a day and now looks set to keep rising. We've seen this government grant an asylum amnesty to 100,000 arrivals without any proper costing on their impact assessment. The government is about priorities. This amnesty is seeing the government pulling up a chair to people who've entered the country illegally at the same time as turning off the heating for our pensioners. Journeys by small boat across the Channel are illegal, dangerous and unnecessary. They're unfair on those who are in genuine need, and as the country's finite capacity is taken up by people coming into the UK from the place of safety in France. Further, it's unfair on the British public due to the huge impact it has on public services. Thanks to the measures brought forward by the last government, in the year June 23 to 24, migrant returns rose by a fifth, enforced returns rose by half, irregular arrivals fell by 26%, and there was a 36% reduction in the asylum backlog. But most importantly, the previous government changed the law so that when people arrived here illegally, they should not be able to claim asylum in the UK and could be returned to their home country or a safe third country. We need